You know, some days in history they just fade away. But others become legends. They're these pivotal moments that completely change everything that comes after. Today, we're going to talk about one of those moments. A day of impossible odds, a day of faith against brute force, a day that would be remembered forever as the Day of Criterion.
So, let's set the scene. Imagine, it's the year 624. We're in a place called Badr, a harsh, sun-scorched valley, completely cut off from the rest of the world. And in that quiet, unforgiving desert air, on the 17th day of Ramadan, two very different groups are about to collide. History is literally holding its breath.
And you really couldn't have two more different reasons for being there. One, army, marching with all the arrogance and confidence in the world. They came to crush a rival once and for all. The other group, this small band of believers, they found themselves in a fight they never really wanted, a fight for their very survival.
Okay, now let's look at the numbers, because this is where the story gets pretty staggering. On one side, you have the Muslims, just 313 men, and they were so poorly equipped they only had 2 horses and about 70 camels between all of them. But on the other side, the Quraysh, a professional army of 1,000 warriors, decked out in armor, with a cavalry of 100 horses and a supply train that went on for days. I mean, on paper, this isn't even a battle, it's an execution.
And this chart really just drives it home, doesn't it? The challenge they were facing was absolutely monumental. They were outnumbered more than 3 to 1. It looked less like a battle and more like, well, like an annihilation. The question wasn't how could they win, it was how could they possibly survive the day.
So that's the big question, right? When you are faced with odds that are just that overwhelming, when brute force seems like it's going to win no matter what hope do you even have? Well, the answer, as it so often is, wasn't going to be found in numbers. It was going to be found in strategy and in faith.
The first piece of the puzzle was this brilliant bit of strategy. One of the companions, a man named Hubab ibn al-Mundhir, came up with this masterful plan, and it was all about the one thing in the desert that's more valuable than swords or shields: water. The idea was simple, but it was genius. They would advance to the nearest well, take control of it, and then fill all the other wells with sand. They'd build a reservoir for themselves, and when the huge Qurayshi army finally arrived, thirsty and exhausted from the desert heat, the Muslims would control the only water for miles.
And then, as if that amazing strategy wasn't enough, something else happened. The sky itself seemed to take a side. It started to rain. But this was a strange rain. For the Muslims, it was this perfect gentle drizzle that just packed the sand down, making the ground firm and easy to walk on. But for the Quraysh, it was a disaster, a heavy downpour that turned their entire camp into a muddy quagmire, bogging down their horses and their heavy gear.
So as the night went on, and his small army got what rest they could, their leader wasn't sleeping. He was alone in his tent in the state of intense, desperate prayer. You can just imagine the weight of everything that was about to happen resting on his shoulders.
And this was his prayer. He raised his hands and made it absolutely clear that this was about so much more than just one battle in the desert. This was for everything. The entire future of his faith was on the line. The stakes, in his mind, could not have possibly been higher.
When dawn finally broke, the battle started, but not in the way you might think. There wasn't a huge, chaotic charge. It began in the traditional Arab way, with a challenge. Champions from each side stepped forward to face each other in single combat, a test of honor and a test of skill.
From the Quraysh side came 3 of their absolute best fighters, Utbah, Shayba, and Walid. To meet them, the Prophet sent his own kinsmen, Hamza, Ali, and Ubaidah. The fight was shockingly fast. In just a few moments, Hamza and Ali had defeated their opponents, and soon after, Utbah fell too.
Just try to imagine the psychological blow that must have been. In the first few minutes of the battle, the morale of that massive Quraysh army was just shattered. Their greatest heroes were already lying dead in the sand.
And it was right at that critical moment that the Prophet Muhammad is said to have looked up and smiled. He turned to his companion and told him that their prayers had been answered. He said he could see the archangel Gabriel, Jibril, at the head of an army from the heavens.
1,000. An army of 1,000 angels descending to join the fight. That terrifying imbalance in numbers, it was about to be leveled in a way that nobody could have ever predicted.
And we even have first-hand accounts that give us a glimpse of what that was like. One soldier talked about chasing down an enemy fighter when all of a sudden he heard the crack of a whip, and the enemy's head just fell from his body before his own sword had even gotten close. The angels weren't just there as moral support, they were fighting.
But for an army to truly break, its leader has to fall. So the focus of the battle turned to the heavily guarded commander of the Quraysh, a man named Abu Jahl, who was one of the fiercest opponents of the new faith.
And his end was just as incredible as the rest of the story. He wasn't taken down by some legendary warrior. He was brought down by two young boys who had sworn they would get justice for insults he'd made against their prophet. The accounts say they saw him in the middle of his bodyguards, charged right through them, and landed the critical hits. A companion later came and delivered the final blow.
And with their commander dead, and their ranks being torn apart by a force they couldn't even see, that army of 1,000, it just fell apart. It disintegrated. The battle was over. And against every odd imaginable, the 313 had won.
And that's why this battle was given a special name. It wasn't just another victory. It was called Yom al-Furqan, the Day of Criterion. It was seen as the moment a clear, decisive line was drawn in the sand, separating what the believers saw as truth from falsehood, as faith from arrogance.
And that really leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? In our own lives, in our own histories, what are those moments that act as our criterion? What really defines that instant when truth is finally and clearly separated from falsehood?